Welcome to the Tangible Hope Podcast. My name is Willie Elliott, and I'm a professor at the University of Michigan, and my co-host is Melinda Lewis, professor of practice at the University of Kansas. Today, we are fortunate enough to have as our guest, Deborah Allen Glickstein, founding executive director of New York City's Kids RISE. If you find this episode informative and want to be sure others hear it, please hit the like button and subscribe. It only takes a second and it helps others find this podcast. Also, you can find links to previous episodes and related materials in the description or show notes. Deborah Allen, maybe you can start us off with a brief overview of new NYC Kids RISE.
Hi there. It's so great to be on this podcast. Thank you both for having me. I am reporting in, zooming in, podcasting in from Long Island City in Queens, in New York City. And I love to share that because so much about what we have built here and what we're building, it really matters. Local matters, neighborhoods matter. And so I just wanted to start with that context. So as Professor Elliott said, I am Deborah Allen Glickstein. I'm the founding executive director of NYC Kids RISE, which is the nonprofit organization that is running and managing the NYC Kids RISE Save for College program in New York City in partnership with the City of New York and the Department of Education, now called NYC Public Schools. And so a little bit about the NYC Kids RISE Save for College program. We are in our 7th year of operation. It is our 3rd year of operating across the full city of New York. We just celebrated that there are 200,000, literally hot off the presses this week. We are podcasting in the first week of January in 2023. There are 200,000 students across New York City with NYC Scholarship Accounts. That includes nearly every single kindergartner, first and second grader in public school across the entire city. And that also includes where I'm podcasting in from in Long Island City, Queens. This is one of the neighborhoods where we launched the pilot of this effort 7 years ago. And so in this neighborhood here, there is nearly every kindergarten through 6th grader here. So that is when you go into any elementary school around this part of town, nearly every kid there has a scholarship account.
Yeah, it's super helpful. I mean, one of the things, Deborah Allen, we were talking a little bit before Willie hit record about, this is the New York City Kids RISE Save for College program. You were just saying that it started as a part of the consumer affairs, division within NYC, but you were really, and those who were working with you were thinking early about making this an effort that did not hinge on the saving contribution of individuals and families. And can you talk a little bit about the fact that really that seems a bit kind of you'd run countercultural a bit. You're in a consumer affairs office starting this, and yet you're saying this is not about individual consumers or about family behavior, even though a lot of CSA folks around the country were thinking about what kind of savings incentives could get families to save. Can you tell us a little bit of that story and why that mattered to you, why you wanted this to be more than how families save?
So the way I talk about it and have been talking about it for a long time is what we are building here and, working with so many different partners at all levels of government, but also all levels sort of within neighborhoods, is building this universal, decentralized wealth building platform. I know that's a lot of jargon, but I'm thinking the listeners here will kind of somewhat understand that. So and the idea here, right, from the beginning, there was a bunch of different goals, right? One of the goals was that every kid will graduate, high school and have a real financial asset. And then the other part of the puzzle was, of course, that they're having the support, the podcast about hope, the expectations from every part of their neighborhood, reinforcing what's possible. And then there's a third piece, of course, that is relevant around financial education and folks having the tools that are needed to understand financial markets and making financial decisions. And so I wouldn't necessarily say from the beginning that it wasn't that individual behavior and individual, make it like savings didn't matter. But this idea from the onset is that neighborhoods matter, communities matter, systems matter, and that we're all operating in a context that we want to really create the conditions across New York City that this is a tool for folks, for communities and others and families to plug in, to really support their kids, our kids, in building wealth over time and also reinforcing these expectations.
I will chime in real quick on that and say that like this to me is, and while it has been happening for a while, I can remember when you and I started talking way back then. I mean, in just the effort even you put into what the platform would look like. I mean, there was so much effort, and even though K2C had a model, you didn't necessarily follow that model exactly, right? And so you did a lot of work there as well. I want to give you kind of credit for that. But and I will say that even within the kind of CSA field landscape, I don't know that New York City originally was that much on the map with regard to the programs talked about, study, and everything else. And so I think that even now, I think that it should be more front and center when we start talking about the K2Cs, mains, and others, even statewide, that we need to start thinking and elevating kind of the work that's being done. And one of the important things we're talking about right now is the idea that, and this goes, and I'll mention this, just something we talked about off camera, is kind of what's going on in St. Louis right now with their savings program, and even I'll put a link to this radio show that I did yesterday around St. Louis's program. And as the treasurer was asked, and kind of the final question from the host, kind of, what would success look like in St. Louis? He defined it as having $500 in an account when kids leave, when they graduate college. And from my perspective, I think New York has taken it so much farther, right? They're thinking about, community outcomes, how communities are participating in it, how they're involved in it, how they can contribute to the accounts. And so it goes so much farther beyond just kind of what the city and what the individual can put into those accounts. That St. Louis is doing some of those things. They are introducing employers and companies are making some donations, but not at the level that New York City is doing. And if CSAs are really to tap into their power, it was never in the ability of the individual to save. And that does not diminish the importance of families saving themselves. It just emphasizes the fact that the real power is in the community being involved in helping build these assets. It's even more powerful than the federal government or states doing it. There's limitations to solving wealth inequality in America or anywhere through only federal investment. Again, that doesn't mean that we don't need federal investment and the federal government shouldn't put a large dollar investment into these accounts. They should. That will not be enough to really solve wealth inequality. We do need communities involved in finding ways of how to help secure their kids' futures, right? I mean, these are community accounts on the behalf of children, and we need to think about them in that way. And we have not talked about them. And I'm to blame to some degree for some of that, because in the early days, we were trying to figure out how, for example, a small dollar account could affect an individual kid's kind of life and trajectory. We start off with the precursor to CSAs, and I'll shut up, are individual development accounts. Just the name itself, individual development accounts. In trying to understand the small dollar effects, we had to emphasize how individuals knew about the account and participated in the account. And so it became all about the individual, probably to a negative, right? Because we did not do a good enough job, I did not do, of at that time making sure that we were also planting the seed of the broader power of CSAs beyond the individual.
New York City, the New York City model here, CSAs is a piece of it, and like the work that you all have done is unbelievable. We've drawn so much from that. But I really look at this as like an interdisciplinary effort. You know, we're drawing from disciplines of like neighborhood effects research, community organizing, like community wealth building, economic development, workforce development, education. So, you know, in terms of New York City not being on the map, I mean, I think in part because I'm not sure we, you know, are always engaged in those settings at the beginning. The other piece that I'll say is that, you know, I think it's helpful to show like how this is playing out in a particular neighborhood. Now, of course, we're across the entire city. And when I talk about this universal wealth building platform, one of the important pieces about this is that, and I'm sure all cities have this case, of course, New York City being very much super diverse, right? There's 32 school districts within New York City. You know, we have the size is about like almost 70,000, maybe more than 70,000 kindergartners a year are coming into the system. Within these school districts, there's like 5, 6, you know, many neighborhoods within the school district. And so we really wanted to create this you know, the Save for College program is almost the wrong term. It's really this platform that we have created, kind of social infrastructure across the city of New York, like the sewer system, like a library system, like these other systems that now different stakeholders and members and ecosystems can plug into it and use it as a tool to support their children, which is really our children. And that can happen in a very micro, like one very specific school community, a neighborhood, or kind of cross neighborhoods and cross cities. So how this plays out, one example is, I'll pick Astoria, Queens, Astoria Houses. Astoria Houses is a public housing community in Astoria. I had the pleasure of going to the graduation of the 5th graders in June, a couple months ago, or 6 months ago now. And that was the first graduating class from the one, you know, where we started this effort. And so the amazing thing, you walk into the school by the public housing development, you see the money tree like front and center. When you walk into the school, there is this like huge poster, like but massive poster in the, you know, and on the money tree, you have all these little dollar bills. You have PS 171, and you have like the amount that as a collective the entire school has in their scholarship account, and the dollar bills represent, you know, all the families that have already activated and seen that they have this money. Talk about kind of incentive structure. You know, one of the first ways families can earn additional money here is by just activating and seeing that they have this, you know, so much so that if you don't know, you know, you have it. That's so much about the research we've learned from you. And we wanted to make sure that was possible. So I walk in, I see the money tree, and I'm walking in with Miss Coger, the former Astoria Houses Tenant Association president, an elder. We walk in, she has been in the neighborhood for 40 years. Her kids like 60 years or something. Her kids had gone to this school many, many years ago. We walk in, we're sitting in the auditorium. Nearly every single 5th grader that was walking across the stage had already activated and viewed that account. And the reason they had done that, and that is pretty amazing, it's more than 90%, is because then that means they logged in, they saw this, that the school has been using the Save for College program as a tool for their college and career readiness efforts. So just by going to PS 171, now you know you have something for your future. And so not only are they doing that, but they're doing a career parade for 529 day. For a scholarship month, they're working to do piggy banks. Fine. So that's those 5th graders. But now let's zoom back. So Miss Coger, the reason she's sitting there with me is because she and the Resident Association, we had worked with her to raise that this was her kind of idea, that she wanted to raise $1,000 for every kid who lived in Astoria Houses to add to their scholarship account. And so we worked with her and her Resident Association to figure out how to do that. It took like a year, you know, and it took many meetings, and it took the whole Astoria broad community coming together, Astoria being a diverse community, other stakeholders sharing their financial resources. And then as a celebration at the end of that, we worked with the Astoria Houses Tenant Association and created like an hour-and-a-half special which included a read-along that was done by the resident association, 20 different community and faith leaders talking about well wishes for the children, including each of the principals where those kids went to school. Now so that was that. It was a pretty big deal. Now zooming sort of even backwards a little bit further, the different community-based organizations hosting college and career breakfasts at Astoria Houses also, and this is sharing and having the principal come to those meetings, and having Urban Upbound Jobs Plus, which is a workforce organization centered in Astoria Houses, as part of job seekers coming in and asking, oh, do you have a 5-year-old sister? Okay, let's make sure. You can activate. Do you want to set up your own account? So I say this all to say, because this is an example of, in a very specific place, all these different stakeholders coming together. And so now when those kids are going across that stage, many of them had participated in many of these things. They're going to have that initial $100. Many of them who live in Astoria Houses will have gotten that additional $1,000. Many of them will also have received additional community scholarships that were broader. So we had partnered with Seamless, the food delivery Grubhub. They had worked to round up for 1 month. And so every kid in the whole school district at that time who had an account that included those fifth graders that were now graduating, I think got almost another $60. Those kids also were part of the cohort where we had 2 local churches come together and lead a concert for college. And through that, they had bought, that was a very local thing. They raised $18.86 for each of the kids. So those kids graduating have whatever rewards their family would have earned by taking some additional building block steps, those community scholarships. But then it's the reinforcement from all these different partners from all these different places about not only the accounts, but just like the expectations about what's possible.
Let me build on a few things here for the field, because I think this is all very relevant. And I'm going to, so something like CEDOK has been monumental for the field. And CEDOK is a randomized experiment taking place in Oklahoma, where roughly several thousand kids got accounts, and some didn't get accounts, blah, blah, blah. But the point of it is that in doing and that was a very necessary and important step so that New York City, Kids Rise could come into being. But it also had to be, it's very limited in that it's 2,000, kids spread across the state, a few thousand kids spread across the state. So you can't do a lot of the things. It was just whether or not we could deliver a CSA at scale in a state, and whether the infrastructure that you're so talking about right now, and why it's so important, and why Sheridan for years has talked about the relevance of having this infrastructure in place. I don't think we were at the level of talking about really, or he wasn't at the level of talking about why it was so important for all the community engagers to dump money in there, but more just have an infrastructure in place. But my point is to say that, so because of those necessary first steps in the way they were design, you couldn't get into these broader uses, right? And all these other things that took place. And so, but then you also create a mindset then within the field that this is what it is, when it was never really supposed to be just that. It just is what we had to do in the beginning because of funding and everything else, and what we had to test and all these things, right? And so we are finally at a freedom kind of moment where we can begin tapping into the real potential of CSAs, which again is important that families save, but also important that all these other, and they were always meant to be that, to have these third party contributing and building wealth on behalf of kids, right? But the struggle for us now, and why New York City is so important and its program is so important to us, is because we have to take people from kind of that what it became to what it can be in your real life experience, and you're putting into place what it actually could be. And even when they're having conversations like Senator Casey and them with a new bill they have come out with, I think is an excellent proposal coming out. However, I don't even think it really fully captures or understands kind of the full power of CSAs and what they can be when they promote it, when they talk about it. When people talk, again, I'm gonna go back to St. Louis and I'll stop because I don't want to hog up all the time. But I could see, and you can see if you listen to that interview, in his mind, he had this very early stage idea of what CSAs were, some little around the corners. If him in the city, the superintendents could understand what New York's doing in the broader use and purpose of CS. It's not about, we're having this conversation with this media person about whether or not families open up accounts, but they haven't even begun to engage in like the story you're telling us, where the schools are participating in the community is participating in, and now we're building a culture around savings, right? This is the bigger, and I will pick at you just a little bit and say that I think that, but the CSA, you mentioned how you're bringing in education people. All that. Well, we've done that all along. That's part of the research is why we have education. And the point of me saying that is not to give us credit for anything, is to simply say that the real power and beauty of the CSA structure is not that it's a silver bullet and does all things, but where it's unique is that it starts early and it goes out and it provides an opportunity for all these different groups to continue to do what they do, but be organized into this one kind of thing. Like our social welfare system is very splintered. Our education system is very higher education, lower education, very splintered. Nothing connects them. One of the beauties of CSAs is that it provides this vehicle. It doesn't do everything. It can't do everything, but it provides this vehicle for families to talk about college, fraternities to participate in every kid's, for people doing mentoring to join in, right? So that really is it, and it has always been it. But you're doing it beautifully and making it more vivid in a way. And there are other, like Oakland, California is doing a wonderful job. Indiana's doing a wonderful job. But many of our programs are much more scaled down in their thinking on this. And so this is really important stuff. And thank you for sharing.
What really resonates with me, what you just said, is just like what has to happen to get to the next thing, and like all like it's lifetimes of work on the evolution of being able to kind of leapfrog. And so I 100% understand, and like it's amazing. I mean, one thing that I'd call out is just the New York City experience has been one of like so many people, and I'm sure that this is like the case in all the other, I imagine it would have to be, that this is from the beginning a public-private community partnership. This was very deliberately not an exclusively government program. This is about like the importance of like Ms. Coger, the woman I just spoke about, the resident association, her civic organization having ownership, being able to be a part of it, the superintendent of that school district really being all in, of course, the mayor, our chief equity officer of the city, Sadia Sherman, her support of this, all these different folks, our comptroller, the state comptroller, just like every level, and that complexity of all these different government partners and all these different civic partners and community partners, and of course, philanthropy, the Gray Foundation, is very high. And to be able to, figure out how to, now one of the kind of interesting moments we are at right now, we are just in the beginning we're in our third year citywide, again, growing from 3,000 kids a year to now 75,000 kids a year. So very quickly growing very fast, going from 39 schools to nearly 1,000 schools a year. Is how do you really support, what is the infrastructure needed in addition to like the account infrastructure needed to support community ownership, not only in the realm of like getting more money into the accounts, like, but also like that different, whether it be school leaders or those civic leaders in different neighborhoods with cultural relevance to them and them owning it, not coming from, NYC Kids RISE, not coming from the city of New York. This has to be something that is like from community, from now that there's 200,000 families, like I think about what we call like we're kind of the scale of engagement for as it relates to even families, right? The most powerful opportunity that exists in my view is the 200,000 folks across the city that now have these accounts. And if we just make it kind of more the families in Astoria, them obviously the reason in part it's been successful is because it was parents, guardians, families that had this, that they were telling other families to make sure that they also activated their accounts. They were going to some of their employers and saying, what if, can you add more money for this community scholarship? And so or will they go to I think about the Concert for College, which was this amazing thing, 1,000 folks from the neighborhood in the high school auditorium with, introducing different gospel acts. But, and that the thing is, those tickets were sold by members of the churches that were running it. And you know what? Some of those people selling those tickets, I'm thinking of my dear, our dear partner, Phoebe Collier, who she actually, also has kids in the program, and so like, this is like, we are our institutions. And it's like, how is it though that we spent all this time within one school district setting that up here, but now how is that possible to bring that across the entire city with all these, with the diversity that New York City has?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, really, it really sounds to me, or seems to me, like the idea of group congruence and identity-based motivation, but like for the community, thinking about what does it look like for a community to feel like this is something that we do together. I wonder, Deborah Ellen, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you do, what your staff does in order to catalyze some of that community, what sounds like magic when I was reading in the case studies about the concert and the different things that are happening and the different ways that people are seeing this infrastructure, seeing this universal program and seeing it as their tool. But I know that it's not magic. It sounds like it's the work that you've done around community wealth building and community organizing and the way that you're bringing those approaches into a CSA structure. Can you just tell us a little bit about what that has looked like so that hopefully as those who are listening who are doing CSA work and themselves want to make this a tool, a platform that others could build on and pick up and run with, would have some sense of what you and your program have done to plant those seeds in order for others to then do that evangelizing for the program and to help it grow.
Yeah. Okay. So just three. One thing that's like just a small language thing that is like just, I think, important and something that I tend to, that kills me. The term program, which is Save for College program, does no one any favors because it makes it seems like it's like kind of this to me. And I like, this is again the point, this idea of being a platform. And so when this is like not at all about how like the bigger question, but it's like sort of the question of like how are they doing it to evangelize the program or for NYC, you didn't say this, but for NYC Kids RISE, like the aspirational hope of this entire thing, which goes to like narrative change, building like a lot of this like branding stuff that is like super important, is that this ideally over time, people aren't thinking about it in a local way for NYC Kids RISE or like for evangelizing the program. It's more about like, it is, we talk about this all the time at PS 171, this is what we do at PS 171, and NYC Kids RISE is sort of like irrelevant to it. And it's really one of the real challenges of the whole thing. And it goes to your I guess like the concreteness, like how did this start? And I think it's or like how do you actually like create the conditions, right? Like I look at our role is like creating the conditions so like folks will like community, whether at every level, see this as a tool to care about all of our children, their children, our children. And so sort of the origin story, right, which I kind of skipped over, which and you can read, maybe we can put this in the show notes, a lot of briefs that we've written that, again, so much building upon like informed by, really like your research over the many, many years. And this was like sort of like the origin story of what happened in the communities of School District 30, where this was launched. And it, as I mentioned, includes Long Island City, Astoria, but also Jackson Heights, East Elmhurst, Corona, Sunnyside, and Woodside. And I hope I'm not forgetting any neighborhood. But those it was truly a co-creation process where literally like I had the great pleasure of meeting with every single school many times, or literally crossing out what are the questions, how are we going to do this, what are they like, how are we going to like put this all together. The parent coordinators for 5 years, these amazing like representatives of the school, met monthly in order to, it's like truly like the ownership of that is what it took, the parent, I know, parent conversations, the like the the community-based organizations coming together, doing charrettes, figuring it out. But this isn't just like a one shot in the pan thing where you just do one focus group and call it a day. And it took tremendous amounts of resources. Major shout out again to the Gray Foundation. When you have philanthropy that is willing to stick with it, not like have trust-based philanthropy, willing to kind of like learn from community to figure out like what is the right structure. So that is really important. Now you can't, so then when we found out that we were going to be able to be citywide, all this foundation was created. The other thing about the era we started, it's considered one of the most, if not the most diverse school district in the city. So you're learning from each of these different pockets in the neighborhood. We're all learning a ton around how this could actually be operationalized and kind of taken to other places. So that sort of, I guess, the second piece in now that we are citywide, we really look at it as like a, like we are here to train, to support different community institutions. So much of our work is around, right, at this point, and it will evolve, has been about providing the container and the tools and the context based on feedback to the 1,000 schools and school communities, so they can understand, okay, here's like some constraints, because it's hard to operate without some constraints. Here's some constraints, here's some information, here's the goals of, use this as a tool this is a tool for college and career readiness, but how are you going to do it? But us, so our work is very much providing that support. And we're seeing that in real action here, where different schools and different communities, this month alone, it's Scholarship Month in New York City, they are doing very different creative things in their community to kind of work to make sure that the new kindergartners know that they have those accounts. The final thing I'll just mention that I think is the thing that I like is a perfect example, and that's something that I'm like so excited about that you're catching me. We just did in December, if we're looking now at the next phase of this work, and so much about, again, what, Willie, you talked about, is like, how does this really be embedded in the fabric of New York City neighborhoods? And how can you really get more money in these accounts? So both of those objectives, recognizing that $5,000, everything is, scale is very different, right? Like right now there's nearly 30 million in assets in the scholarship accounts across the 200,000 kids. So when I say $5,000, that for some folks that compare, that may not sound like a lot of money. But when you talk about $5,000 for three grades in one school, or a full elementary school, it's a lot of money over time, that can be added across if you keep getting that. So anyway, so with this last in November, December, towards those objectives, we worked, it's really, again, not coming from us. Someone knew about this, was working with us, Maria Bellis, who was very involved with building this. He's an alumni of PS 69 in Queens. He's like, I want to do this because one day I want to be able to give back. I grew up in Jackson Heights in the 80s. That was not an easy place to be for him. And you had to find, back then you had to find, I think it was 5 classrooms to find one kid with a 529 account. I want to make sure, I'm driven to create this platform because I want to be able to give back to the kids where I was sitting, because I know that would have mattered to me. And so he gave the first alumni community scholarship to the kids at PS 69. And then fast forward, another alumni heard about this, Abe Fernandez, and he was like, this is amazing. I want to do that at PS 85, where I grew up in West Farms in the Bronx. I'm sorry, in Fordham in the Bronx. And so those two men, they really spurred something very fabulous. And it was like, okay, let's figure out, maybe other folks want to do that. And within such a short amount of time, we're like, we'll just try it. Long story short, 39 alumni within a very short amount of time raised $136,000, or I think it was around more than 30 sets of students across schools. And, it just gives you a glimpse. So it's not, so they work to raise the money. But then they're also going to be doing videos to say, I used to be sitting where you are, and they're going to be visiting, some of them visiting the schools. And then we're going to bring in a reception to bring everyone together. And you can imagine how far this can go. And some of the, it's decentralized, universal wealth building. So there's going to be some of these community scholarships where New York City Public School alumni community scholarships, where there's going to get, these kids will get another $500, and there's going to be some that they're going to get $10. And I will say we are able to do a match for whatever was raised. The minimum was $5 a student. So it's, this isn't just about people who have access to huge amount of money. This is folks that are regular folks that can, some people decided to fundraise through their network. Some people decided to, were able to write their own check. But it is, again, about helping to strengthen connections to schools, showcase to children what's possible, who you can be, and then also really show how this platform can be used by kind of New Yorkers.
Let me jump in for a little bit. So this is all, this is tremendously important for the field and for others to hear. I want to say quickly, I'll give some light again. This is a different arm in Wabash County, but the early Wabash County program, they kind of created templates for other communities throughout Indiana to do, and it sounds similar in some ways to this. I mean, obviously there's more expansion and stuff here, but I want to say that one of the advantages, maybe advantages or disadvantages, I don't think it has to be either, but that you have is that it started off not as a citywide program, right? And so the challenge and the thing you're trying to learn now is, how do we do the same thing at scale, right? And so I think about states like Pennsylvania and others who they started off with that. And what I'm trying to emphasize here is that we tend to have what often prevents us from moving forward is we have people with the mindset it has to be community driven. We have people in the mindset it needs to be state driven. Well, it needs to be both of those, right? I mean, it needs to be everyone all involved. And some programs are going to start locally and expand up and have that challenge. And others are going to start statewide and have to expand downward, if you will, to the community, right? Find ways, because they're starting off with everybody getting an account. Now we got to figure out, how do we bring the communities in and do that? Well, you started off bringing in certain communities. Now you got to figure out how to scale that up to other communities, right? So whatever direction you're going in, there are different challenges for sure. But the end goal is the same, is how do we get, because what we're trying to do, and this was a lot of conversation about this early on, but again, you can't have these things in secondary data analysis. So when I started off, you're not going to have a culture of saving and going to college. We used to say, we save, we go to college. We talk about the we part, right? That was one of our things around identity-based motivation, is to build that culture and idea. But my point is that now we're at a point where, we're trying to, we don't even understand, and I keep falling out my camera, so that's not great, but we don't even understand, like, the spillover effects of these accounts. What do I mean by that? Like, so when we have findings from CEDOK or other programs, you don't get any of that spillover effect, that building a culture within it, every kid having an account, other kids talking, to community talking about, right? You're not getting any of those effects within those findings. And so I think the potential of these programs is so much broader and bigger than we think, not only in the sense of engaging more people, but the size of the impact on individuals once we build these cultures up. And a lot of the things, when people start focusing right on our family saving now, well, we have a whole culture in America of not saving until later. We can't expect that to change in a day. But as these identities build and people start to, like you're doing in New York, I mean, I even thought, and I'm going to tell you this, right? I'm going to say it online because so everybody can hear. I even think, like, we should post this episode before we post our other episode, because I think it's that important to the field. Seriously. Because I think I work with so many of these programs, and they have such a narrow understanding in some instances. Some have very broad understandings and doing really great work. Everybody's doing great work, but they just don't have the full understanding. And having them just get a glimpse of what what the potential is and how they're not tapping into it. And lastly, we need to do a better job of, as we're talking to people around the country, and I think this is why it's important for Deborah Allen, and where New York is so unfortunate, they have you. Some programs don't have a you. No, I'm seriously. And so this is extra burden that I'm throwing on you, and we already talked about all your burdens, is that it's relevant and important that you get out and that you share this information with other communities. And hopefully this podcast will help do that, because it's one thing for me to say it, it's another thing for you having built it, delivered it, doing it. And so I think you just can be fundamentally important for, even I think about Senator Casey, like when he promotes this bill, like you should be in the Senate hearing meetings, because they're not going to get a real sense of the power of it from Michael Sheridan coming there talking about it. Now, Michael's going to do awesome things with it. But or Willie Elliott, right? Whoever the person is you're talking about, because you're going to bring in this expansive power of CSAs that's not captured when we just talk about, the 10 principles of CSAs. Is it automatic? Right? It's cheating it on some level. That's important, and we can't be without that. But this other part is equally as important. I talked too long again. But that was fun.
Well, I think that, we're at time or a bit over it. But I guess what I would love to close with, Deborah Ellen, is, it is different to think about a platform than a program. And I'm on board. I'll make sure that I'm using language that that more fully captures what this effort is, what it looks like, and what it's possible, what it can possibly achieve. But I'm interested in what you are looking at in the future of NYC Kids Rise. Like, so not interim outcomes of a program, but like, what are the indicators of the health of this platform, of use of the platform, of, kind of those diffused transformations that come from a platform existing in the communities where it is thriving, and kind of what are you looking at and hoping for in the future, and to continue with the title of the podcast, what is giving you some tangible hopes for what you can see as consequences of this platform, and what people can build on it.
Real quick, Deborah Allen, you got that plug there for tangible hope, right? I like it. Good job.
Well, because this is near the final word, I will just reiterate here that we are working to really build this universal, decentralized wealth building platform across New York City, and it takes all of us. It truly takes all of us. And I think I really gave some of the examples already. What gives me hope is that, public school alumni of New York City, of which there are so many, so diverse, so brilliant, so fabulous, that now there is a tool for them to give back and to demonstrate what's possible and share their social capital and financial capital across New York City as in their individual schools and then as the collective. That gives me so much hope. Bishop Taylor, Reverend Mason, the Concert for College. They're doing another Concert for College Black History Month in February. That gives me hope. And, at this time, 5 years later, we're celebrating that every kid in elementary school who lives in the local public housing developments has these accounts. There's nothing probably that gives me more hope than that. And the final thing I'll say, I haven't mentioned this one, Copel Auto Group, which is a car dealer in Jackson Heights, down the street from where I said my Murray, who's doing the community scholarship where he grew up, they are doing $20 for every car sold into the accounts of one, and I think this is in the brief, one school in that neighborhood. And so these are all like super, and then finally the scholarship month, where different schools across the city are doing different types of activities to make sure families know that they have this, and it doesn't all look the same, but they're all working to advance that families are activating the accounts. And then finally, because it's all, it all gives me hope, where you look at PS 171 and you see that more than 90% of those kids have activated their accounts, and that money tree is when you walk in. And so the glimpses of how truly this decentralized universal wealth building platform can work and actually is working is just super exciting. And I think that, over the next 5 years, the next terrain is, one, you need to make sure these public-private community partnerships, they're sustainable resources to support them. The amount of I say, like, I hope, it's PS 71 saving, but obviously the nonprofit running the thing needs to be able to do the community organizing, support this, do the coordination, manage the backbone, all the pieces of this, the technology that has to be resourced appropriately. Then you need the baseline money. We talk about equity, the base, what's equal, everyone gets the initial $100 and then has the opportunity to earn these additional rewards. That has to be resourced. And then, of course, the fact that we need to, Willie, this is the whole point of this conversation, is that what we call community scholarships, this extra money that creates this capital stack, that some people may say, oh, that's discretionary, how much goes in there, that, you need these basic things. But my point is that it's absolutely, it is discretionary in some ways, but it's also so important to the future of these efforts that there's actually gets to be as much money as possible in these accounts, especially in places that have been historically excluded. So, that's really the work. How are we going to make sure that that's possible from both federal, state, local government, as well as philanthropy, as well as other different sort of creative solutions?
Hey, I love you, Deborah Ellen, because you all the time that I kind of sit around thinking about these things and writing and about them, you actually have are bringing them to life, right? So,
wow.
To me, that's just, and that's a different skill set and different tasks. And so, really appreciative of that and the work of all the people within the CSA field. But want to give you a special kudos and very excited.
Well, coming from you.
Well, thank you so much for spending your morning here talking with us. I loved reading the case study, and it felt like I was reading almost a fictional story that you would want to read, and then I would remind myself that this is true. That this I could picture myself in the room with the concert happening, and these characters felt like characters because they were that their commitment to not the platform, but to what would be possible for these children who they clearly love. And that idea of kind of public love is something that, is my background in community organizing, resonates strongly with me. And it just comes through in how you talk about how this tool is helping people realize their own ambitions and live the commitments they have for these people and places that they clearly love. So thank you for doing that work and for being willing to share it with us today.
We want to remind you to like and subscribe. It's really important that we get this word out there. Not only, while we're talking about this from the United States standpoint, there's like 15 million accounts across the country, and there's several other countries that are getting ready to start. Largely, I give Michael Schrad and the Center for Social Development a lot of credit for that international work, but they're getting ready to start national programs in several other countries. And so hopefully this kind of message will get out to all of them so they can understand and be able to dream a dream that they didn't think was possible. You're creating an environment for people to dream beyond what we're currently doing. And so I think it's really important. So great work. Thanks, everyone. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next episode.
Thank you.